Hey there everyone, Neil here, my Broken Jaw series. This particular video is going to be about the sort of background on SolarWinds Orion software supply chain integrity compromise. I'm going to do my best to look at the camera and not the screen that shows my face moving around and talking. I'm distracting myself. I'm going to try and look at you. So, as I mentioned, SolarWinds Orion software is used by about well over 300,000 entities around the world. So this little video here is going to be the start of at least two to hopefully define some terms so that we can actually talk about them and the impact of this particular supply chain integrity compromise to corporations and government entities alike. So let's kick this in full gear. I'm a classical camp kind of guy, and you'll see that in my definitions. However, media, politicians, celebrities, and even government bureaucrats, or government employees, have transformed some of these terms into public or social norms, and I'm hoping to clarify some of these with legal reference. So the very first one that I want to pick on is cyber attack. That's right. In this Talon manual that I have in my hand here, Rule 92 of the Talon manual, and you'll find the similar statement in international law textbooks, is that a cyber attack is a cyber operation, whether offensive or defensive, that is reasonably expected to cause injury or death to persons or damage or destruction to objects. I've said that so many times in my life, and anyway, I'm going to get on my soapbox for a second here, and I know a bunch of international lawyers that will likely join me in saying, please stop calling everything a cyber attack. And while you're at it, please stop calling everything an attack. It's embarrassing, and as a Canadian, I don't want you to embarrass our country. Okay, there, I said it. The next term, cyber weapons. Back to the Talon manual, this time Rule 103, Commentary 2. Cyber weapons are means of warfare that are used, designed, or intended to be used to cause injury or death to persons, damage or destruction to objects, that result in consequences required for qualification of a cyber operations as an attack. Basically what they're saying is, in order for this to be a cyber weapon, it also must be a cyber attack. Anyway, so really it's very specific things are cyber attacks, and even more specific things are cyber weapons. So the next term is espionage. And again, in the classical sense, imagine we're in the 1950s and the 60s, and you're an agent of the United States, or an agent of your state, and you live in the United States. And you've traveled to another state, let's call that Russia, bringing a camera with you and some tape audio recording equipment with the intention to make copies of Russian documents and record their conversations. You need to travel to that state, risk your life, your family's life, and friends' lives through possible exposure or capture, and attempt to gather whatever information you require. At no time do you ever take any documents. You simply make copies. Okay, when you return to your nation state, you're commended for your actions, even if you had to cultivate targets turning Russian state citizens against their state, essentially making them commit treason. Convert this to cyber. When I act as an agent of my state and copy another nation state's data, it's really just espionage. The next term, sabotage. Let's roll back the clock to 1960s again. And you're an agent and you go out and destroy documents. You change the minds of foreign government officials and convince them to do things that are in the best interest of your own state. Or you alter documents to reflect certain changes and that completely change the narrative. All of that's sabotage. I convert this to cyber. Why do we call this an attack? At a nation-state to nation-state level, it's just sabotage. I encrypt your data so you can no longer access it. I destroy your data. I delete it, essentially. I alter your data or change certain records in your data set. I change the content to result in different political decisions, whatever it might be there. All of that was sabotage. Now, There are some protected matters, or I call them protected matters, matters that are considered breach of sovereignty. And to be clear, only a state carries sovereignty. So just so, you say, hey, am I sovereign? No. Country sovereignty. So in order to violate sovereignty over cyber, one would need to violate territorial integrity or impact inherently governmental functions. Without permission or authority, if I fly into your airspace or traverse into your waterways on a surface vessel, for example, or step over into your land, over your borders, basically, I violate territorial integrity. If I mess with your policing, impact with your collection of national revenue, or impact ballot counting, all of these fall under inherently governmental functions. So convert this to cyber. If I have close access, as in walk into your building, to cyber operations of any kind resulting in functional damage, that would likely violate territorial integrity because I have to cross borders and get there. Cyber actions causing permanent physical damage to compute infrastructure or permanently encrypting all your data, including your backups, probably also would violate sovereignty. The mystery lies in temporary violations, such as those causing slowdowns we've seen in denial of services, to port scanning, to performing espionage by remotely operating within your compute infrastructure and copying data, or sabotage by implanting malware for future use that may be destructive, akin to a landmine. All of that is vague. Now, in response to breaches of sovereignty through cyber means, nation states may perform countermeasures, apply a plea of necessity, use retortion, or claim self-defense. And for all the cyber folks out there, countermeasure, let me clarify that one more time. It's an otherwise unlawful act used to compel another state to cease their unlawful actions currently underway. So on November 10th, 2016, the former U.S. State Department legal advisor Brian Egan spoke regarding international law and the stability in cyberspace at the Berkeley Law School, stating, remote cyber operations involving computers or other network devices located on another state's territory do not constitute per se violation of international law. And that was powerful, what he said. What I interpret out of that is espionage is expected and allowed. He went on to say most states, including the United States, engage in intelligence collection abroad, and that the collection of intelligence overseas is not unique to America. The United States, like other nations, has gathered intelligence throughout its history to ensure that national security and foreign policy decision makers have access to timely, accurate, and insightful information. Again, all of what he said there means more espionage. More espionage is allowed and expected. The problem, different countries have different positions on these matters. So, France, for example, is much more aggressive in their position of sovereignty and cyber operations in general, while the UK doesn't even believe one can violate sovereignty through cyber means. Unfortunately, Canada has not taken a stand on this yet, and that really matters to me. Next word, negligence. Let's say you leave your front door open, back in the classical sense, unlocked sometimes, and you keep your precious items on display in your home versus in a safe or behind some levels of security. And if those precious items were to be stolen or damaged, by example, one could argue that you were negligent in your care of those items, making you partially responsible for their damage. Converting this into cyber, if you have poor cyber hygiene and you don't keep your backups, let's say, for example, you don't even test your restores. You don't review your firewall rules regularly and look for intrusions or look at your logs essentially and repair your firewall rules accordingly. You don't have good policies and thereby procedures related to intrusions and overall are kind of a set it and forget it person. Well, then when you do have a breach, one could easily argue that you were negligent and partly responsible for any of the breaches that you may have experienced. I love the use of the word negligence. It's fun. Next word, crime. Now, let's say you're not a nation state. You're an individual or an entity like a corporation, and I copy your data through cyber means, breaching your confidentiality. That's cyber crime, not an attack. Let's say I delete your data or encrypt it through ransomware. That too is cyber crime. But wait, you tripped over the dormant landmine and triggered the ransomware. And if you had good cyber hygiene, you would simply just reinstall your operating systems and restore from backup, possibly even. Your backups are offline, right? Not impacted by the ransomware. And if you can't do that, well, then it's still criminal on my part. But in this case, you're also negligent. So let's roll back the clock to a few minutes ago where I was talking about violations of sovereignty as a country. Let's say you're a concerned patriot, skilled in cyber intrusions or have access to zero-day tools and hacks, and you decide to take it upon yourself to cause harm to, let's go with this thing in order. You cause harm to another company in your own state. Well, that's crime. You cause, or person in your own state, that's crime. You cause harm to an entity, person or company basically, in another state. That's crime too. You cause harm to a government entity in another state. And this is where things get really interesting. If you're a Canadian, a US citizen, an Australian, a Western European, that includes England by the way, Japanese, or one of the 67 signatories to the Convention on Cybercrime, also known as the Budapest Convention, then it's incumbent upon your nation, Canada in my case, to take appropriate legal action upon me if I commit said actions. If Canada chooses to ignore their responsibilities and let it slide for me, then the country I harm can consider me an organ of my state or acting on behalf of Canada, thereby opening the door for them to claim breach of sovereignty and taking actions against Canada. What I'm saying is, just because you have the tools or the knowledge to do something doesn't mean you should do it. Your actions may result in your own harm, or worse, harm to your nation. Again, if you're patriotic, of course. In closing, as we continue to name and shame Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea on their cyber actions, let's use the proper words so that we don't glorify their actions and also don't glorify our own. Because legally, these definitions matter, and their use and results in their use literally just results in different treatment. I hope this video clarifies the terms for you and helps you point the finger at someone when they use the words like cyber attack or cyber weapons. And if you're an IT professional, I hope you don't go around performing what's called countermeasures. And remember that you can be treated as an organ of your state or accountable through your negligence. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll chat on the next one soon.